our moderator, so we decided to maximize the time and just go ahead and start with the presentation. We're looking for Jerry's presentation, actually. So the order might flip around a little bit as we go through the program. But joining me today is Jerry Avila, who is the regional manager for export solutions for SBA, based here in Northern California. Paul Oliva at the far end there, who's the founder and chief consultant of Oliva Global Communications and also the chair of the Northern California District Export Council. And he is appointed to that position by the Secretary of Commerce, Secretary Locke. And Charles Tansey, who's the senior vice president of Import Bank. So welcome. So this is my, can everyone see me? I sort of feel low here on the panel. So this is what I'm going to cover here in my approximately 15 minutes of time here is why go about exporting, what are the services that are available, how can I access them, who can help me, where can I find you, and when can we start? So first of all, why on earth does the U.S. government even focus on exporting? Well, first of all, a huge percentage of the global purchasing power is outside the United States. U.S. exports in the last 20 years have grown phenomenally to over $2 trillion. American companies that export generally pay higher wages, and manufacturers that export are growing jobs more quickly. Exporting also, and when I'm talking about exporting here, I'm not talking about only the exports of products, but I'm also talking about the export of services. So if you're selling consulting services, you're selling engineering design services, legal services, accounting services, marketing services, any of those professional services are also under the banner of exporting. So exporting, of course, you can derive additional revenue streams. You can learn a great deal about what other markets are doing by being engaged abroad. If you're exporting or you're doing business internationally, you can have influence over industry trends, over foreign government regulations, and so forth. And of course, also hedging against market fluctuations in the United States. For those who are not yet exporting or considering getting started, bear in mind that it will take quite a bit of effort. There will be a lot of upfront work in terms of deciding what your business plan is going to be, how you're going to approach the market. You're going to be naturally very, very busy keeping the lights on and your business running here locally in the Valley. You may be having most of your funds tied up in the starting up of your company. Perhaps you lack experience or familiarity with how to even go about starting this in the first place. Some of the questions, and I know there's a little bit of an eye chart, so my apologies, but some of the questions that my office come to our office just about on a daily basis are listed here, and I just kind of grabbed a few as I was making this presentation. But how do I find the correct harmonized code for my product? How do I protect my IP in China? I'm exhibiting at CES, and how can I protect my IP at the show? What is a license required? Do I need a license to start up my company, or is any kind of license required to export my product? I shipped my product to somewhere and my buyer never paid me. What are some of the things that the government can do to support me? So the U.S. Commercial Service is an agency of the Commerce Department in the International Trade Administration. We were founded in 1980. We have offices across the United States, including my office locally here in Silicon Valley. We have a number of offices throughout Northern California. We have a very specific mandate, and that is on the export promotion side. We work directly with small and mid-sized companies to assist them in exporting their products and services overseas. We also help educate companies in terms of how they might tailor their product, making sure that, for example, if you're exporting your cell phones to Europe, you've gone through all the appropriate testing and labeling requirements, finding out about what's needed for that market and so forth. And we do a number of training programs as well. So apart from the 100 or so offices that we have across the United States that are working directly with companies in this community, We have the other side of our house is the overseas side, which is a fabulous opportunity and resource for small businesses who may have only one office here in the United States. You're not a multinational firm, you don't have a global footprint, but nevertheless you want to take advantage of opportunities in France and Ghana and Mexico. So you can use the U.S. Commercial Service through your local office here in San Jose or San Francisco or Boise, and we tap into our global network of U.S. commercial specialists and commercial service officers. They're all located in U.S. embassies and consulates around the world, and these are some of the locations where we have staff. And I should say that our staff's main job in the embassies is to promote U.S. exports. So they are focused, the commercial staff are focused directly on assisting U.S. companies to get into the market, overcoming trade barriers and different problems, promotional activities and so forth in the country. So one of the ways that we measure ourselves, and I think that's important for the audience to be aware of, is how well the clients do that we work with. So last year, we logged, or our clients rather, reported to us more than 12,000 successful transactions. So that could be a successful shipment that happened as a result of some information that we provided or a contact. It could be a contract that they signed, but it was a successful transaction by a U.S. company. It was over $80 billion in goods and services tied up in those transactions. We had $30 billion in project advocacy. So advocacy is another function of the Commerce Department within ITA, the International Trade Administration. We have what's called the U.S. Advocacy Center. And for advocacy, what I mean here is, let's say you are a telecommunications company and the government of Singapore is installing a new telecommunications network. They have put out an RFP and you are bidding amongst many, but you're competing against other foreign companies for that contract. So you can submit a request to the Commerce Department. It's a very simple process to request U.S. Commerce Department advocacy for your project. Now, that doesn't mean that we are going to advocate on behalf of one U.S. company over another U.S. company. Obviously, we could not do that. But we can advocate for U.S. companies in general. If you happen to be the only U.S. company, we can certainly do that, advocate on your behalf. And we can also advocate for transparency to make sure that the foreign government is abiding by its agreements and standards to provide a fair and transparent process for U.S. companies. So, you know, there are $30 billion in contracts that U.S. companies were able to successfully negotiate and finalize last year in the advocacy area. And as I mentioned, we mostly work with small and medium-sized enterprises, and those transactions can be anywhere from between $50 to $50 million. We're happy for all of them, small or large. What's happening? What's happening? It just froze. Okay. There we go. Great. Thank you. So one of the first ways to start off working with us is if you need trade counseling, and that could be everything from helping you determine what the best markets are for your product or your service. We can help identifying foreign business partners overseas for you, complying with standards and regulations. Protocol, tax, and accounting information. That, although we are not, neither are we accountants nor lawyers, nevertheless, we can provide you those types of resources and referrals to service providers in the market. Also, U.S. companies will come to us often for assistance in complying with U.S. government regulations, such as export controls. We have an agency within the Department of Commerce, the Bureau of Industry and Security. We are very fortunate in that we have an office out here on the West Coast, here in the Bay Area, in San Jose. And Larry Sullivan is a fabulous person to get to know if you're exporting goods or services or information. And Larry can help you on the front end determining whether or not any of your technology is controlled, if there are any export licenses that might be required for your product. We have hundreds of thousands of documents that are freely available to U.S. companies that are available on our market research on export.gov. One of the most frequently requested services that we provide is called our Gold Key Matching Service. So this is a service, let's say you are interested in selling your medical device in India, but you're a small company, you do not have an office in India, but let's say you've gone through the regulations to have your product sold legally in India, but nevertheless you need a business partner and you have no idea where to start. Maybe someone contacted you by email, but you have no idea how to vet them, but you need somebody to help represent your company there. So the U.S. Embassy, the U.S. Commercial Service, can provide this arrangements through the Gold Key Matching Service to set you up with a list of people, companies in India who would be suitable, who are pre-screened and pre-qualified by the embassy to assist you to be represented in that market. And you will fly to India. That you are briefed by the U.S. Embassy, and if you request, then we can attend the meetings with you and arrange local transportation, hotels, and so forth.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Questions afterwards, or I just wanted to ask
Yeah.
About IPs. Do they help with intellectual properties during that phase of
We are not able to provide legal advice. However, we can advise generally on IP and provide you links to resources and training that can assist you in protecting your intellectual property. Yes. Yep. And I have a slide, I think, on some of the IP resources that are available through Commerce a little bit later on. Skip to this one. International Company Profile is basically our background check service. This is a background check that's done by the U.S. Embassy on a foreign company, not a foreign individual, but on a foreign company. So if you are getting ready to sign an agreement, even if you've done your own due diligence in-house, but you want this foreign buyer, this foreign customer, this foreign business partner, representative, agent, reseller, if you want them vetted further by the U.S. Embassy as part of your corporate due diligence, you can request the International Company Profile. That's available to you as well. That's offered in most of our markets overseas. Just to kind of give you a quick flavor of some of the upcoming local events here in the Bay Area, these are a few of the seminars happening here locally that you might want to know about. If you're interested in the basics of exporting, I would encourage you to attend the SCORE workshop that's coming up on the 20th in Oakland. Those are about $35 usually and last about a half a day. The International Buyer Program, I just want to briefly cover this. Since we have a huge trade show happening today in Las Vegas, CES. CES, along with all the others here on the slide, are certified trade shows by the Department of Commerce, meaning that we bring our foreign commercial specialists over from the embassies, U.S. embassies abroad. They come to the show. We have 32 of them at CES this week. They are working directly with U.S. companies that are at the show, that are exhibiting, that want to get, and many of those commercial specialists have brought with them delegations of foreign buyers. So the opportunity for you is that if you're attending any of these shows, you have any of these on your calendar for the coming year, bear in mind that the U.S. Department of Commerce will have a presence at the show, and we will be bringing our specialists from overseas there. You can sign up for free one-on-one appointments with those specialists, and you can also express your interest in meeting with the foreign buyers. We can bring them by your booth. We have quite a few trade missions coming up. This is the ones coming up in the first part of the year, but we have many, many trade missions coming up this year in a variety of industries. All of these are still open for your registration. And I will, if I could direct you to the right-hand side of the chart, those are the upcoming webinars. So you don't always have to, hop in your car and drive to a seminar. We have most, I would say, actually, of our programs these days are done by webinar or webcast. Those are a few coming up. Many of them are free. Some of them, cost $30 or $40. IPR resources, we had a question on that. I would recommend browsing over to stopfakes.gov. We have the Patent and Trademark Office, together with ITA, have put together IPR toolkits on those countries that are mentioned there on the upper part of the slide. Also, the Department of Commerce and the American Bar Association have a free legal consultation, 1-hour legal consultation for a small handful of countries there that are listed, where you can go online and request that 1-hour consultation with an attorney on IP-related questions you might have. Some more resources. I'm not going to cover XM. There are a number of government agencies, U.S. government agencies, that are involved in some fashion with export promotion, international trade. ITA and the U.S. Commercial Service are the main export promotion. We're the main export promotion agency. There are other agencies involved. We have SBA here. We have XM. OPIC is another one. OPIC supports U.S. companies that are making capital investments overseas. They provide political risk insurance and project financing assistance. And these are primarily projects, they all are projects that are going to be in developing markets. And USTDA. USTDA is a smaller U.S. government agency. They're like OPIC, based entirely out of Washington, D.C. TDA, what I would draw your attention to here is that their work, a lot of their very important work, and where we kind of intersect with them, is when they are working with foreign government officials who are, let's say, Turkey is the one we had recently. So Turkey, which is in a very high earthquake zone, Turkey wanted to install a new telecommunications and security network for their first responders. So TDA will work with the ministry, with the various government ministries in Turkey, to bring them to the United States and help them help raise awareness of U.S. technologies that might be available for them to procure. So obviously, great opportunity for U.S. companies to export their products to Turkey. So you might want to reach out to TDA as well. And there's my contact information. We have a monthly newsletter. If you are interested in receiving that, just send me an email. And I'll be available after the program, too. Thank you.
Loud, my wife says. I'm called a USIAC, which is an acronym for United States Export Assistance Center. And there's 18 of me throughout the country, and what we do is help small businesses export. But what we're at right now is we're in a new world order, economically speaking. China just surpassed Japan, I heard last week, as the second largest economic industrial country. United States is still first, but Japan it was surpassed by China. Also, the countries that you we're looking forward to in terms of economic strength, you've got U.S., of course, but you've got China, which is projected to exceed the U.S. at its current level in about 10, 15 years. But you've also got Brazil, you've got the European Union, and you've got India. But there are tremendous opportunities out there. China right now is going through large inflation, 5%. There's concerns there in the country. India has tremendous power, economic power, but they're having consumer shortages, like food. Onions is a basic staple in India. The cost of onions have gone up 40% from this year, from last year. Same thing with China in terms of cabbage. So there are opportunities out there for U.S. companies. Having said that, let me talk to you a little bit about what do you push for this? That's us. Small business exports are exploding. In 2008, SBA reported over 3,300 loans for $1.7 billion. When I say loans, I'm talking about guarantees to small business exporters. We surpassed the $1 billion mark for the third time. That $1.07 billion supported over $2.4 billion in export sales. And because of the small business bill that just went up, that is expected to double because these numbers were reached when our guarantee limit was $1.5 million. It's now been increased to $5 million, so we can support export transactions up to $5 million. And we are feeling feeling that right now. Right now on my desk is I've got an export to China for $3 million in terms of automobile exports. I just, last month, I supported a company that was exporting environmental equipment. They sold it to Bow Steel. It was about $1.4 million. What we do is we guarantee the lender 90% of that $1.4 million. You might say to yourself, well, why does a bank need a guarantee from the federal government? Well, a lot of times the bylaws of banks preclude them from taking foreign assets or foreign receivables as collateral. So they can't do the transaction. So SBA goes in and we review the transaction. If there's a reasonable assurance of repayment, these are not grant funds. If there's a reasonable assurance of repayment, we help structure the transaction. We give the guarantee, give the lender a 90% guarantee, and we can facilitate the transaction. We get the transaction done. We help promote U.S. exports. And we work, and I'll let Ex-Im Bank, we work very closely with Ex-Im Bank. We're not on a commission basis. We work very close in partnership with DOC, Department of Commerce, and the Export-Import Bank. In any case, in 2008, the SBA counseled and trained over close to 10,000 businesses, and we trained over 2,800 export lenders. We are becoming export-oriented. In 2006, we had about $375 billion in exports. That's more than $1 billion today. Our largest export markets for U.S. goods here in the U.S. in 2008 were Canada with $261.4 billion, Mexico with $151 billion, China with $71 billion, Japan, and then Germany. Number one and number two was Canada and Mexico. What does that tell us about NAFTA? It works. Our number one state for attracting foreign direct investment, the top investing countries were Japan, UK, and the Netherlands. And foreign businesses here in California work. They're healthy for the California economy, the U.S. economy. They accounted for over 700,000 jobs. And this has gone up here. Export opportunities, keep this in mind. And it's gone up to 96. More than 96% of the world's population and 2/3 of the world's purchasing power is outside the United States. There are tremendous opportunities in exporting. There's a perception that small businesses do not export. Not true. The fact is there are 259,000 exporters today versus 182 in 1992. And 72% of all exporters have fewer than 20 employees. So there are small businesses engaged in exporting. And the small and medium-sized, that's what we refer to them as SMEs, the share of the U.S. merchandise export markets is 30%, or about $500 billion annually. So there are small businesses that are players in the U.S. in the export market. There's a lot of lenders that don't think they have customers in their portfolio, and that's not true. California is the global export leader, reporting in 2008 $145 billion in exports. Exporters grow 22% faster than non-exporting companies. Exporting are the winners. And risky, and this is what's really interesting, out of the SBA, all the SBA programs, the export working capital has the lowest loss and default rate. And why? Because we work with the exporters to help structure the transactions where it's on a self-liquidating basis. Again, we're real sensitive. We're making guarantees to banks. We got tax dollars back in our guarantees, so we're sensitive in terms of our underwriting that we find a reasonable assurance of repayment. We have two programs. We got the Export Working Capital Program and the Export Express. The Export Express was just made a permanent program, and they increased it under the Small Jobs Bill from $250,000 to $500,000. And the funds may be used for nearly any business purpose, which directly or indirectly supports international trade. And this is the neat part about it. The use of the proceeds under the Export Express, it could be used to finance export development activities, such as participation in a foreign trade show or translation of the product literature in the use of that, in that foreign market you're trying to get into. It can be used for transaction-specific financing for overseas orders, i.e., you get an order from overseas under letter of credit. We permit the bank to make an advance in that letter of credit so you can go out and purchase your goods to manufacture your widget so you can export under that letter of credit. We use it for revolving lines of credit for export purposes. There's a company, we just put a guarantee in Oakland. They export a lot of food products to the Pacific Rim, to grocery stores there. We permit advances against those orders, and then we finance those receivables. Under the Export Express, you can use that for acquiring or constructing or renovating your building or your office facilities. And basically, if that's going to help you increase your manpower and your capability of increasing your exports, the Export Express loan can be used, the funds under the Export Express can be used for that. And that goes, again, up to $500,000. And it can be used for financing standby letters of credit, used or bid or performance bonds. And for example, if you're dealing in Middle East Africa, a lot of times if you go into Middle East Africa and you have a particular job you want to bid on, a lot of times they require, the sellers over there require that you come up with a bid bond. So we allow, a lot of times lenders are very restrictive in issuing bid bonds because that basically is a way a bank gives a guarantee, and it's really an unsecured position for a bank. So a lot of times we will go in there and we will guarantee the lender 90% if they issue a bid bond. If the exporter is successful in that bid, a lot of times the bid, which is sometimes maybe 2 to 3 to 5% of the transaction, if they get successful in getting the bid, then the seller or the buyer overseas asks for a performance guarantee. And sometimes the bid goes from 5% to, say, 10%. So we will allow a lender to increase the standby letter of credit from 5 to 10% to allow that exporter to fulfill the contract they just bid on. Does that make sense? Okay. And the standbys are real. That's a real powerful document, and banks are very reluctant. They're looking for strong collateral support for that because it's basically a guarantee that they're issuing, a performance guarantee that they're issuing. To qualify for Export Express, basically the business has to be in business for 12 months, 1 year. Doesn't have to be in exporting, but just in business for 1 year. The proceeds can be used to develop or expand in the applicant's export markets, and the lenders to illustrate how the loan proceeds will be allowed the company to engage itself in international. It's very simple. The beauty of this Export Express is it's at the discretion of a lender. We go out and we train the lenders on the Export Express, and they have the discretion to approve it. They don't come back and ask us if they can approve it. They have the discretion to approve it, and they just report it to us. And then we have an export working capital. I'll go real quickly through this. It goes up to $5 million. It can be used for pre-shipment guarantee loans, proceeds to acquire. That's like a standby letter of credit. We advance against the standby letter of credit. Company can go out and purchase the goods and to ship under that letter of credit. And I hate to do, well, let's see. There was a couple of transactions in environmental equipment to China. They did it under a letter of credit. It was about $1.2 million. We permitted the company to come in borrow up to 80% of that letter of credit. They took the proceeds, they went out and bought the equipment, and then they shipped under the letter of credit. And when the proceeds came in from the drawing under that letter of credit, they used that to pay down the loan. The difference went to the exporter. And then we could use post-shipment guarantee for discounting accounts receivable. You could use it for single or revolving lines of credit. Maximum amount is $5 million. We give a guarantee of 90% or $4.5 million under the EWCP. We advance up to 85% of foreign receivables. This is, if you're interested in the fees, let's say we do a $1 million transaction for a exporter. The SBA guarantee would be 90%, so that would be a $900,000 guarantee that we would issue to the lender. The cost to the exporter would be 1/4 of 1%. So on $900,000, the fee to the exporter would be $2,200, $2,250, which is very, very reasonable to put together a transaction. And that will go down depending on the size of the transaction. It doesn't have to be $1 million. It could be $100,000, $50,000. And our role is to help you. We try to work with your lender. A lot of times when someone will call me, I'll talk to them about the transaction. The first thing comes out of my mouth is, who's your bank? Because a good way to look at it is the bank's our customer, you're the customer of the bank. But a lot of times, you got a lot of community banks or small banks. Or sometimes you get big banks, they don't want to work with the transaction. But a lot of times I'll go to the bank and say, we've got an export transaction, we've got these programs, are you interested? And if they say no, then what I do is go out and find a lender to help put together that transaction. Again, my only goal and my only objective is to help small businesses export. Let's see. Basically, to qualify, exporter must demonstrate ability to perform. That's their biggest concern. Does the company have the ability to perform? And has been in business for 12 months. They have to follow the SBA size standards. Basically, manufacturers can go up to 500 employees, for example. It has to have, if they have more than $5 million in capital, $15 million in sales. If it's below those numbers, it's a small business. We also finance trading companies. We have a country limitation schedule that XM will talk about. We follow that religiously. We have an exporter, a company that wanted to export to China, and they wanted us to advance against purchase orders. Now, we do permit advances against purchase orders. But China, under the country limitation schedule, under XM's country limitation schedule, it basically says transactions under the working capital must be under an export letter, must be under a letter of credit. And it lists the number of banks. So we had to go back to the exporter and say, the only way we will finance that is if the letter of credit is issued by this bank, and it must be under a letter of credit, not a purchase order. So there are some guidelines that we have to follow, and the country limitation schedule is something we follow very closely. Once all the information is put together by a bank under EWC, under the Export Express, I don't see it. It's just reported to me. Under the EWCP in Northern California, I have to do the underwriting, so I look at it and do all the transactions, and then I recommend it. I don't approve it, but I recommend it. So, but we prepare the loan authorization, we send it to the bank, and the transaction, and we can usually do that. And if all the information is presented to me by the bank, I can usually get a turnaround within 4 to 5 days, and that's fast. And that's all the UCS. That's how quick our turnaround is. There's some differences between the SBA and XM program. We do SBA allows for financing against a transaction, a specific transaction. We have no hard collateral borrowing base requirement. Our guarantee fees vary. We have a transaction philosophy. If the company has a negative net worth, that's okay. But cash flow can be explained. We've done transactions like that. We have no military no military restrictions, and we have no U.S. content restrictions. I think XM has a 51%. We don't have that restriction, but we have a restriction where the goods have to be exported outside the U.S. For example, we were doing car exports, and they wanted to do a third country shipment on Volvos from wherever to some other country. We said, no, it has to be an export from the United States. We don't do third country shipments. And we basically use reasonable judgment to promote exports. And we work closely, like I said, with Exim Bank and the Department of Commerce. Paul Watts is here from the San Francisco office. We're not on a commission basis. We have the same objective. That's me. And you know, when they asked me to come here to talk, it's the Asian American and the Pacific Islanders, I said, yo soy mexicano. But, so what I did was I wore my tie with the pineapples. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thanks for coming out here today. It's always difficult to take time out of a day when you're making something, building something, selling something. It's always a bit of a challenge to make a determination that you're going to take time away from that to come out and listen to what we have to say. So thank you. I'm going to try to make this short. I did not bring a PowerPoint, but we do have my remarks in a PowerPoint form at the back of the room. Paul Watts, stand up there and just point to where the box is. If you don't get one, leave a card in the box. And oh, okay, hand it out. But leave a card with us, and we'll send you a copy. The Export-Import Bank is the official credit agency for the United States. We were set up in 1934, and our mission specifically is to encourage American companies to grow revenues through exporting. That's our primary mission. And the way we do it is we provide financing through guaranteeing of debt for the exporter, financing the buyer, the foreign buyer, through guarantees. I didn't bring my cell phone. And we also provide credit insurance that supports the exporter in the sales to the buyer. We make sure that buyer pays, or we pay if the buyer can't. Those are the key methods that we're using to do what we do. We are about $80 billion in total commitments right now. We do about $25 billion a year in authorizations, and we operate at no cost to the government. We generated, the last 5 years, we've generated about $1 billion and put it back into the Treasury. Our value added is somewhere in between where Commerce is and where the SBA is in terms of the specific. We know what's going on in about 167 countries in which we are open for business. We know what's going on financially. That is, we know the accounting standards and protocols. We know the way people are conducting business. We know who the banks are. We know who the government officials are, what the rules are for lending and borrowing and delivering shipments and that sort of thing. So we have that as our knowledge base. That's our value added more than anything else, is that knowledge base. And we've developed over the years primarily with large businesses. Our largest businesses, Boeing is probably our biggest. That's about 50% of what we do. And Caterpillar, large capital equipment players. 80% of our dollar volume is with large corporations. And 80%, however, of our unit volume is with small businesses. And one of the things that the administration would like us to do is to expand that percentage of dollar volume and unit volume with small businesses. And that's why I'm here. That's my job. I'm head of the small business group at the Exim Bank. And we have been growing. 2 years ago in 2008, we did $3.3 billion in authorizations. Last year, we did $5.1 billion in authorizations. This year, we're trying to do $6 billion in authorizations, and we're listening very hard to our friends in the SBA and Commerce USDA and other places, but most importantly to the customers, potential customers, as to what we can do to make it easier to conduct business with us. Now, there are two things that we focus on with small businesses. There are actually three kinds of financing that we do broadly, but there's two in particular we focus on. One is a working capital facility, which is a borrowing base. As Jerry mentioned, it's a borrowing base type of facility where we're lending against receivables and inventory. We can lend up to $25 million. If you want to go higher than $25 million, we can do that too. We just have to take it to the board, and it takes a little bit longer to get your response. We can lend as little as $5,000. It's not particularly efficient, but it can be done. If you're looking for if you're a company with an interesting credit history, and you have some losses, you're not really strong on capital, but you have good receivables, good customers, good inventories that you probably want to come to us. But we do have a requirement. We're further down the scale in terms of experience. We like to have company with at least 3 years of business experience and at least a year of sound exporting. We're looking much more detailed, in a much more detailed manner, at even the smallest businesses. And it does take time to get an answer. Unless you're dealing with one of our delegated banks, it can take you 3-4 weeks. It can take longer than that to get a response on our working capital side. The cost of it is anywhere from 1% to 1.5%. We share that with the bank, so the bank ostensibly reduces the price to the borrower. The other big program we have for small businesses is trade credit insurance. That is the one that most of you would be most interested in at an early stage. The SBA is one of our best sources of business for that activity. And trade credit insurance basically means that we're going to be insuring 95% of the receivable that you're getting from the buyer overseas. And the cost on that can range anywhere from 50 cents per $100, 50 basis points, up to about 50, depending on what country you're shipping to. We do make distinctions among countries in terms of the risk, although we do have a program also for small businesses which does not do that, which it's all a flat price. And for our money, we think that that's the best place to start with the Ex-Im Bank for anybody. You can get insurance against single buyers. You can get insurance against a number of buyers in different countries. If you're experienced, we can give you discretionary credit limits where you can make determinations about how much of our insurance policy is allocated to which of your clients. And that's something that I would highly recommend. We do have, as Jerry mentioned, some restrictions on what we do. We do not do military equipment. We don't finance that. We don't get involved in it. We have a restriction on content. If you are exporting and you want assistance from us, at least 50% of your product has to be manufactured in the United States, and it's a fairly liberal determination of what that 50% means, but it is 50%. We do want the value added in that product to be based here. So that's another one. We do allow for indirect exports. If you're making something here and selling it to a company here that exports that final product overseas, we do finance that as well. And finally, there is the thing that Jerry mentioned, the country limitation schedule. We have 197 countries. There's one new every minute out there in the world today. I think California is one. I know, I come from the District of Columbia. We're a country unto ourselves sometimes. But we are open in 167 of those countries, and we change them from time to time depending on what conditions are, whether we should be doing business or not doing business. I did have an interesting experience, just a note on that. We were closed this year in Sudan. It's one of the countries we're closed in, and we had a company in Maine, a small business in Maine that makes voting machines. And the Sudanese were going to have elections, and it was our interest as a country to have those elections occur in the Sudan. And this little company up in Maine managed to win the contract to sell voting machines to the UN, which was going to transfer them to Sudan, and for use in the elections in November. The problem was, we're closed for business in Sudan. And so here you have, it was actually a woman-owned business, had a great product, and they're fulfilling a public purpose and a national purpose, but we could not actually do the deal unless we got a presidential waiver. So that's what we did. Now, this is not a product line of ours, but we did, it took us 2 months, and it went through national security, it went up to the Pentagon, and we had a general sign-off on it. But it did get done, and we got the voting machines there about a day before the elections. But anyway, those are the kinds of things we run into. I'm not going to go on because we're running out of time here, but I do want to say we have offices here in California, in San Diego, Los Angeles, and here in San Francisco. And on the sheets I have them back, we have the numbers of the people that you would want to contact. My final comment here is that we have a seamless relationship with Commerce and with the SBA. Both of them have been very, very good to us in housing us. We are in the USIAC, U.S. Export Assistance Centers, and where we're not, we have active relationships with them. We refer clients to them, they refer clients to us. We do overline stuff. If the SBA doesn't have enough exposure, we will take what they have above the exposure they're allotted. And we share banks, do business with both of us, and we do our best to use their services for people who need assistance coming back. So the relationship among the agents is very clear, it's seamless, it's streamlined, and anywhere you start in that process, it's all to the good. Thank you.
National business development. So most of you. So I mean, the issue that you're beginning to gather is you got a lot of sort of education to do to even understand a lot of the terms that are being thrown around, and what's a working capital loan and all the rest of that. The challenge for you is understanding how much time it's going to take to be able to do that, to bring yourself up to speed. So I'm going to really quickly run through a few of the resources that can help you get to a point where you can have a good discussion with and know when you're ready to be talking with Joanne and Jerry and XM folks. In addition, I'll try to spend a little bit of time and I'm going to try to compress this as much as I can so that we can maybe have a chance for a few questions. But a few perspectives on my own interaction with the programs and my own use of programs and a few thoughts like that. So first off, I'm chairman of the Northern California District Export Council. So this is business people who have some international expertise and were appointed by the Secretary of Commerce to both be a service for you all, so you can give us a call and ask questions, but also then for us to be a sounding board for the government folks in how are things working, or are there things that could be done better. We try to focus on economic growth and international competitiveness. We work very, very closely with the U.S. Export Assistance Centers, who you've heard from. And as Joanne said, she's not the only one in Northern California. You have several that you can draw on depending on where all you're located. We are part of a national network of district export councils. So if you have friends or you're doing stuff elsewhere around the country, you have district export councils elsewhere. And we do things like mentoring local firms. So again, like I said, call up, ask us questions. We do some recommendations on policy occasionally to the U.S. government, like, is there enough money going to these kinds of services? Or are they working well? Are there enough bodies? Like there's a vacancy right now in Joanne's counterpart in this Fresno office that's vacant right now. So there's some problems there. We try to say, hey, let's focus some resources there. We do some promotion of international business development initiatives, like there are the trade shows and missions and things that Joanne has talked about, but there are also things that the state of California does, that individual chambers of commerce and trade associations do. So we try to help get out the word about those things or help them promote those. And then we do some international business training that hopefully will be getting larger. how do you start to access all this stuff? So first off, Joanne talked about the U.S. government services and the portal in, but what you got in trade.gov is guide to services and offices, some good data and analysis, and then all of the background information you need on the cost-effective programs that Joanne talked about, as well as some of the counterpart agencies. U.S. Department of Commerce isn't the only one, depending on what industry you're in. If you're in energy, the U.S. Department of Energy has some things. If you're in doing food or agricultural products, there's some things there. So make use of the things that kind of drill into your area of specialty or expertise. A good additional starting point is the California Chamber of Commerce. They have at this website, calchamber.com/international, they have a really nice, simple, easy to navigate set of here are contacts, here are binational chambers of commerce, here are some of the trade associations that do things. They've got California-specific trade data. They've got news feed on things from Wall Street Journal and San Francisco Chronicle and LA Times and things on international trade. And very, very importantly, they've got a guide to exporting that you can click on and order. It'll take you through a lot of the basic sort of questions of, you know, what do some of those terms mean that my colleagues here on the panel were talking about. Similar to the Cal Chamber thing, but also dropping down into some more online tutorials is Tradeport at tradeport.org, and it's connected with a local trade association called the Monterey Bay International Trade Association. They run it. So those are some things to kind of bring yourself up to speed if any of what they said wasn't clear. Training resources. We do not yet have training programs at the NorCal DEC. We are working on building them. We feel that there's not enough going on. We'd like to see, you know, at least 3-4 times a year here in the Silicon Valley, 3-4 times a year in San Francisco, 3-4 times a year Sacramento. You know, starting to get some basics of exporting on top of then what I think it was Jerry mentioned with the SCORE program, or Joanne with the Basics of Exporting program in Oakland that's coming up this month. You can access the existing SCORE things through the SBA website. In addition, there are centers for international trade development, and they're San Bruno, Campbell, Sacramento, Fresno, Merced in Northern California. CITDs also do different kinds of seminars, and they're all different. You can access the menu of things that they have at citd.org. An interesting thing about the CITDs is they also will help with importing, so not just exporting, so not just selling foreign, but if you're also trying to bring goods in, they can provide some training and educational support services, which I think probably for many of you is something that might be useful to have help with. And then don't forget about international business associations. Also, there's the Northern California World Trade Center. I mentioned Monterey Bay International Trade Association. Binational chambers can be very, very useful as well. So depending on where you're looking at focusing, that can be very useful. Turning to Asia Pacific, California is going to be hosting the largest diplomatic meeting in its history since 1951 in San Francisco. It's going to be focusing on Asia Pacific cooperation. Most of that discussion is going to be policy oriented, but we're looking, I'm heading the host committee for that. We're looking at ways in which we might be able to have exhibits or some separate conference activity that would allow you to do some business development and networking. So we're looking at it. Keep an eye out for what might happen there. It'll be a very, very big deal. We're expecting several cabinet secretaries, including Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. So it's really, really worth watching. California Asia Business Council, the Asia Society, and Asia Foundation are all Asia Pacific specific organizations, as well as look at sister city committees for the cities where you are or where you're near. For instance, San Francisco is a very, very active one with Vietnam, the San Francisco-Hanoi sister city. Just a couple of really quick concluding thoughts. You know, I've used and worked with all of these folks, both on the inside and on the outside. You know, when I started out as an entrepreneur, I used a SBA SCORE program to learn how to set up my business, how to figure out the accounting, how to do a business plan. So that really is the fundamentals. Take a look at that. Take the time to figure out how to set up your business, and be careful about how much you spend on third-party resources. There's government resources. There are a lot of self-help. You will ultimately need some professional help with attorneys and the like, but be careful how you spend money and how much you focus on it. The UCX, working with Joanne's colleagues, I've had them help me find contacts, key business contacts in other countries to come to events or meetings that I've worked on, both as an individual entrepreneur as also when I was at Visa. Then financing on top of the SBA and XM stuff. Again, individual industries. The California Energy Commission has financing programs for energy technology exporting. Similarly, the California Department of Food and Agriculture has some support for food and agricultural exports. So keep an eye on that, and happy to take your questions, as I'm sure my colleagues are as well. We have about 10 minutes, I think.
Thank you so much for our panelists today. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A. So I know we had passed out papers, but just raise your hand if you have a question and direct it to the panelists.
So you said the export business, a lot of times in financing, you're looking at, you said 3 years in business and then 1 year in export for you to finance?
Yeah, the question is, what is the minimum requirement that XM has? We don't actually have a stated minimum requirement, but in terms of the time, effort, cost, generally speaking, if you're a new company and you haven't done any exporting, our programs on the working capital side typically will not be a good deal for a bank or for you. We manually underwrite every deal, if it's $5,000 or $25 million. And in the working capital side, it's a little bit different for these guys over here. When Jerry's talking about a 5-day turnaround for his EWCP, he's underwriting it and he's getting it back to you in that space of time. If you go to the Export Express, you can get what, a 24-hour turnaround time?
Yeah, in fact, they don't even, under the Export Express, it goes to $500,000, and the bank has the lender has the full discretion of approving it that day, you know, whatever. They don't have to come to SBA. We've given them the authority to approve the loan. All they have to do is report it back to us. All they have to do to get the 90% guarantee under the Export Express is to authenticate, and it can be just a verbal authentication from the exporter that the proceeds will be from the company, that the funds will be used for exporting in some way.
So you don't require 1 year in business?
We require 1 year in business, but it doesn't have to be in exporting, just 1 year in business, and that's all we require.
Yeah.
And
you have to do business first in the United States and establish as a business prior to exporting, or you have to find your...
we guarantee businesses that are doing business in the U.S. We do not, proceeds cannot be used to fund an overseas operation. It's for U.S. businesses here in the U.S. And then we also finance export. For example, we were talking to there's a scrap metallist. They were exporting scrap to China, scrap steel, scrap whatever. And then they were also buying scraps in Canada, and they wanted to export that to China. And we said, we will not finance, we will not, you got a purchase order, we will not advance or permit advances against that purchase order to purchase your scrap in Canada to export it to China. Now, if you wanted to loan to bring that scrap into the U.S., into your premises here, and then re-export it to China or wherever, that qualifies. But it has to be an export from U.S.
The gentleman in the back.
We're promoting U.S. companies.
I'm a chemical engineer, and in the last 3 weeks client consultant from India had visited a power generation conference in Orlando, Power Gen 2010. And he was in Orlando, Florida. He visited Irvine, California, and San Jose, California for 2 days. And one of his suggestions was for increasing U.S. exports on a fast track to India. There is a need for setting up warehouses in India for U.S. exports. If there is financing available for warehousing the U.S. exports, India has 25 states, so we can have 25 warehouses in India for U.S. export material. So I wanted to know whether finance is available for setting up warehouses in India for U.S. exports.
Not that I'm aware of, but there's ways to structure that transaction, because I used to finance a company. It was called Burn Scott International about 100 years ago. I'm an old guy. And they were doing high-powered auto equipment to Australia. So they had a warehouse in Australia full of high-powered automobile equipment, things like that. So the way you do that is you get a bank here with an office in Australia. You can take, because their collateral is in Australia, so you find a lender who has an office in that country, and they establish a line of credit with securing it with that collateral in that country with the guarantee of the parent here. So there's ways to structure that transaction, but our guarantee precludes us from financing overseas operations of a U.S. company. We just can't do it.
Now, from the Exim Bank standpoint, there is a way to go about it, but again, it gets back to the issue of content. If the warehouses are made out of materials, for example, Butler Manufacturing is a U.S. manufacturer of steel buildings. If it's a Butler manufacturing building, we can finance that. If it's an American architect, if it's an American construction firm, we can finance that. So as long as we can hit the content targets, we do finance the buyer. I didn't go into a great deal of detail on it because that's a more extensive activity, but financing the buyer is one of the things that we do on a medium and a long-term basis, and that's where that would fit.
That's under the buyer directive.
Yeah. We provide guarantees there.
The question is, similar to USA, small business clusters, in India also there are small business clusters coming up in all the 25 states in India, and they are looking for partnerships from American companies who would like to partner for developing small business clusters in India. So is that also considered as an export? Technical services.
Well, technical services certainly would be. If there's a group that is an American group that has the capacity to deliver services under a contract, yeah, that would be something that we could finance, or we could provide a guarantee to backstop a bank that would finance that.
I think a simple way to conceive of what the constraints are on the U.S. government programs is if there is anyone outside of the United States who's giving money to you inside the United States and that money is crossing the border, then that's an export. That's the simple way to think about it, whether it's service or goods.
That's a good.
I was going to ask that. So it is transaction specific, as long as there's a financial transaction that shows the export.
Yeah.
At present, all of the activity that we do at Exim Bank is transaction specific, even the largest ones. And now there are sovereign deals that we do that are not transaction specific. That is where we're providing credit to backstop South Korean banks, which we did this past year. We did $600 million of support during a crisis there. But everything else that's in the private sector is transaction specific.
I think really, I'm sorry, I kind of butted in, and I do apologize for that. But it's definitely dovetailing on his question. I think when I was talking transaction specific, if I'm a consultant and I provide services virtually, it really, that becomes an export service because of the transaction that's made, not because I'm physically in.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Right. It's where the value is.
That's eligible.
I also wanted to clarify something from the commercial service side of things. So we often get requests, and this is an example of where we really cannot assist. We get requests from foreign governments. Let's say the government of Indonesia is developing some new industrial park, right? And they're looking at getting U.S. companies to go and invest in their industrial park. We cannot help. There is not a benefit, okay? There has to be an export-related benefit. We are not going to encourage U.S. companies to pick up from Mountain View and go outside of the U.S. We do not do that. So we cannot help in those cases. There are also foreign businesses and governments that come to us. They've got, a delegation of companies here that are looking for U.S., venture capital. We cannot assist with that. So just bear in mind, it's export related. There has to be a U.S. company that is exporting a service or a product. They are getting paid for that transaction. That's what we're about. Okay.
I have a two-part question. My first is, are your services extended to the U.S. territories with any restrictions, or is it the same? Like, for example, American Samoa.
American territories, Guam falls within the region that I'm in. That's part of we go out there and market to the banks, not that I'm aware of.
And then I wanted to ask if you showed a list of countries as far as your advocacy countries. What if it's not on that list? How would you get your country on that list?
Yeah, so the list there was where our offices are actually located, where we actually have people on the ground in the U.S. embassies and consulates. So where we don't have a commercial, so Bangladesh is an example. So we don't have this is getting a little bit into the weeds, but we don't have a Commerce Department employee at the embassy. We have, of course, a State Department. We have an embassy there in Bangladesh, and we have a lot of State Department staff. We have, in those cases, and there are many of them, we use the State Department. State Department partners with Commerce. They're familiar with our programs, and as far as the exporter's experience, it's in our experience, it's been pretty seamless. So we know who those State Department employees are in Bangladesh and elsewhere where we don't have a Commerce Department employee, and they're very familiar with our terminology, our language, what we do, how we work, and can generally provide a lot of the similar types of services. So.
What do you suggest as a starting point to start this process if I wanted to get in contact with your department to get our country, like for instance Samoa, which is in a separate country, it's not an American.
Oh, I see. Well, I mean, we could talk after the program. I'd be happy to give you my card, and we can get into the details. Okay.
Yeah, we have time for 2 more questions.
Okay. I'm sorry. This is not a real question per se, but I'd like to share some information with the panel as well as everybody in the room. Number one, our company is co-hosting a big event in Los Angeles in April. It's called China-U.S. Business Summit. And I have the information here. We have hundreds of Chinese entrepreneurs coming to the event, and they're looking for the U.S. partners to work together. So this is a tremendous platform for U.S. small business to fund their foreign partners. I have the information, so if you're interested, feel free to give me your business card. We can contact you later. The other thing is our company is a EB-5 program that raises the immigration investors' funds overseas and then make small business loans in the state of California. We can make 504 loans to a lot of business in California across all different counties at this point. And we like to let people know, understand that, and if you have the funding need, you can also contact us. All right, thank you.
We'll take actually 2 more questions after that. You start over there?
This is a question for Joanne. The slides were very, very helpful. I hope you get a chance to get those online. One of the slides actually had something about a trade mission to Africa and Middle East. Could you talk a little bit about that and how one can get involved?
Yeah, so I would be happy to give you the website. You can go straight to the trade missions page. You can see the agenda. that's there. The trade missions, they really, they're, for the one for Africa, I can't remember the industry that it's on. I think it's probably infrastructure, so it's probably a broad range of infrastructure-related industries like telecommunications, transportation, energy, also service providers, so firms that are in, engineering, consultation sectors, that sort of thing. I would definitely consider it. And I can give you the website I didn't leave the slides, but I'll give you the website where you can look at the mission and you can go and apply online. Yeah. And then the trade missions are usually about a week in length, and they're absolutely fantastic as far as getting those access to high, local government contacts in the market, and really even networking amongst the trade mission participants yourselves. So it's a really good opportunity.
My name is Tavi, and I'm with Axiom International, and we represent a clean tech product. It's renewable. It's really water technology for a developing country, looking at Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam, and so forth. Now, the end user is not the consumer, it's not the purchaser, it's not the buyer. So how much help can you provide in terms of identifying purchasers such as large NGOs or World Bank or the IMF, people who can buy those products and give it in for community-specific projects that help developing or people in the bottom of the pyramid? Am I clear?
Are you? I wasn't sure if you said you were selling to NGOs or if you're selling directly to the foreign government, or if you're selling to consumers.
The end users of this product will not have the purchasing, will not have the money pretty much to buy the product. So we're trying to find large NGOs that can use the technology, because it does address health issues and water issues and so forth. Because a lot of these people live, 60% of them live under the $2 per day poverty limit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, we can certainly help introduce you to other U.S. government programs that may be able to provide assistance. So maybe we should talk after the program.
Well, and I might say too, many NGOs are located outside the United States. So if you're selling to the Red Cross in Switzerland, then that's an export. So.
Yep. Or if you're selling, to the Red Cross in Switzerland, or if you're selling to a government, if the government, the foreign government, is the entity that's the buyer, you're selling to them, and they are in turn providing those to their citizens, then that's an export to a foreign government, and we absolutely can assist with that. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm sorry to cut this program short. I know there's a lot of interesting questions that folks have, but we actually have to wrap up because we're going to get ready for the lunch plenary. But thank you so much for coming to today's panel, and thank you so much for our amazing panelists here today. We have about 10 minutes. There's boxed lunches outside, and then you can head over to the theater.
You said that